In this assignment, we're going to do a matching challenge where I show you what something looks like, and I'll sort of explain a little bit about some of the strategy that you might take to styling this, but ultimately you're going to need to do this yourself. So you're going to be provided with a set of HTML, and that's what you see here on the left. And on the right, this is sort of what the thing would finally look like in the end. Okay, and so right now, let's just take a really quick peek and we can look at the way that everything is set up. So over here on the left side, we have some comments that will make it kind of easier for you to understand what's happening. So we have a thing called the page header, and what it is it's actually a header tag, and it has an ID assigned to it that equals the name of banner. Okay, and so of course banner is an ID that is just made up. It's a made up name, but it is going to be the single identifier for what the banner quote unquote is on that page, and it's assigned to this header tag. And then inside of that we have a heading level 1 called Art Revisited and a heading level 2 called Selected Artists. And you'll see if you were to look over to the right side in red, where it says Artist Revisited and Selected Artists, that basically consists of what all is in this header. So you could kind of look at this a little bit and say, oh, okay, well, that might be a way for me to approach how I want to design this and say, okay, well, the header looks red. Like everything in the header is red, so maybe you could start to think about the header being red. And also you could look at, you know, some of the dimensions and stuff in terms of the box model padding and margins and things like that. But also the H1 and the H2 have special treatments, and you'll notice that the H1, for instance, has double text shadows on it to give it this really graphic feel. And the H2 also does, but it's harder to tell that that's true. And then you'll know if you come down on the left side here to the next section, which says internal page navigation in the comment, right? And you'll see that there's a nav tag below it. And sorry, my selection scroll gets messed up. Anyway, the nav tag inside of that has an unordered list with a bunch of, well, 3 list items. Each of those list items has a link, and the links, as you can see here, they hover and turn red, and they're sort of a button style. Okay, and we haven't really talked about anything with what are called floats yet, so you're not going to be using any floats to create this. You're only going to be using the things that we've talked about so far in our lecture materials, and so you might want to go back and take a look at the different display types to see what would be an appropriate way to get these display types to work for your list items, right? Hint, hint. Okay. And if you take a look also, you'll see that like this nav or the UL has got a black background, whichever way you want to look at that as a styling. It also has like both of these, the nav section and the header up here have kind of a drop shadow you can see. It gives it a little bit of an illusion of depth, right? And then if you come down a little bit further, we have this main content area. Oh, and by the way, these links right here, if I were to click this, it would jump down to the section of the page that is about Jenny Holzer. If I clicked on Jenny Holzer, if I click on Donald Judd, it jumps to him, and there's a back to top. Okay, so that all automatically should tell you that it jumps up back to the banner. Anyway, so if we take a look at this main section, this is going to be the main content, and inside of it, you'll notice that we have an article, and inside of that article, we have a header, and the header, if you'll look over to the right, is sort of this blue color, this sort of like tealish blue color. And inside of the header, we've got an H2 says Frank Stella, and H3 is a description of him as a minimalist painter. And you'll notice that minimalist painter over here, just this is another little hint, is in my typing has initial caps in the HTML, but if you look over here, it's all lowercase. So that should suggest something about one of the uh, you know, font decorations that you're going to use, and specifically how you're going to transform the text. Okay, so think about text transformation. Okay, anyway, but that header, you could also look at that here, and if you look at a parallel construction down here in the Judd article, you'll see that the Judd article also has a header and looks exactly the same. So you can start to think about Jenny Holzer also has the same, and if you look at her construction, it's a parallel construction. So I want you to pay attention to things that are parallel construction, and the reason for that is because that way you don't have to style each individual thing if all of them are going to be the same. So this is where you could start thinking about descendant rules, where you look at the fact that this header is inside of an article, right? Whereas up here, this header is not inside of an article. So one of the ways that you could easily target this header, actually all of these headers that are inside of articles, is that you could do something like article space header. And then that would actually target with the exact same styling each one of these headers in the same fashion. All right, so that's a hint also. I just kind of gave something away to you. But this is a way that you can start to visually look at the HTML and then look at this over here and start to break it down. You know, and right now I'm having you kind of do matching stuff so that you can start to think about how to organize this visually and how to get the styling to work with the HTML. But at some point, you know, you're going to be doing all of this stuff on your own. But this way it kind of helps you see the relationship of something that's already existing, like in this HTML, to something that gives you a starting place for design, and how you can start to visually break things down based on the code so that later you can do it on your own completely from scratch, right? Anyway, but then the next thing that you'll notice inside of the Stella article is that it jumps right into images. So it's an IMG tag, another IMG tag, and then you're also going to notice, look, the IMGs, they butt right up to one another in some cases. All right, in the IMG tag, right, so you've got these IMG tags, and you remember IMGs or images are natively inline elements, and so they want to sit side by side each other. So part of your work is already done. Again, we're not dealing with floats yet, so none of this stuff is floated. So just remember that. And then you'll also notice as you look at these images, so you've got your IMG tag and you've got your SRC or source attribute, and then it tells you the source address for that picture. So that's the value, right? It goes and it gives you the value of where to go find that picture. I have these already uploaded on a server somewhere, so fortunately you don't have to go and place them. They're already there. And then you'll see next you have an alt attribute, which stands for alternative text, if you remember. And then inside of the alt attribute, it has the title of each piece. All right, and then you'll see something that is called the title attribute, and the title attribute also has the same thing as alt, but so that you have an understanding of what the title attribute is you see whenever I hover over a picture, it pops up with like a little tooltip. We're getting that from this thing called the title attribute, just so you have an understanding of that. And then after the title attribute, at the very end, you'll notice on all of these images, there's an attribute for class. Class equals, in this case, full. And then on this other one right here, class equals 60. On another one, class equals 40. And if you look at, you know, each one of these and you start to kind of do a little bit of logic, well, full, if you look at this first one, that's full scale, like it's going 100% of its parent container. And then if you look at the next one, and I had mentioned that this one was class equals 60, it looks like it's about 60%. And then the one after that is a class of 40, and that looks like it's about 40% in width. Okay, and then this one is a little confusing because it's actually one big picture, even though it looks like half and half. But this is one big picture, and if I were to hover over it, see, it's come over here and hover, I should get a tooltip. There we go, and then here we go. And this one's called Jasper's Dilemma, and if I if I move my mouse somewhere else and I hover back on this side, you'll see it's still Jasper's Dilemma 1962. So you can see that that is just actually one image. And this is one of the ways that you can start to kind of dissect what you're looking at. All right, but anyway, that one has a class of full, so we know that that goes 100%. And so you can start to think about the fact that each of these classes is actually helping each of these behave in a certain way in terms of the amount of space that they're filling up. Okay, and then if you get down beyond the last image, you'll see that there is a footer tag. All right, let's look at that. It's a footer tag for each article, and that corresponds with this black section down here. And inside of the footer, we have a paragraph that has two anchor tags. The first anchor tag says more about Frank Stella, and then here we go. There's that whole anchor tag, and it links out to a Wikipedia page. And then the other link is back to top, right? So if we were to click that, it would jump back to the top of the page. And you can see here that it says to go to hashtag banner, right? And if you remember up here, the ID is banner, right? So that's a reminder of how that works, right? So the href, the URL, it's jumping to the same page, but it's jumping up to that banner ID. Okay, and if you look at that, then it's the end of the article. And so if we see the bottom where it's black and you see this article end, and that tells you that the article itself has this style with an outline or a border and a box shadow, right? And so it looks like it probably has some padding maybe, right? And so you can start to kind of visually look at this and think about how you would accomplish this styling. And each one of these is basically the same. The only difference might be the arrangement of these different pictures. Now again, let's look at Donald Judd. You can start to dissect this. He has the first image, it says class equals full, right? And so you can look at this one, and that one is the same, Untitled 1991. That's what this is. All right, the next image, this says class equals full. This might be confusing because it looks like 5 different pictures, but it's 5 different pictures that's made into one picture. And so these are basically just 2 pictures that take up the full amount of the space, right? And then if you look down at Jenny Holzer, right, we've got some more images, and the header and everything is the same as everything else, just the text is different. So in this picture file, you see that we've got a class that equals 33, right? Well, there are 3 of them, and each one you see has a class equaling 33 and another one with a class equaling 33. And so that means that these all together probably somehow have a width set for a class called 33 that is like 33.33333 never ending percent, right? And so that these things will fit all side by side, right? And then if you look below that, the next picture, IMG, is class of 50%, right? And you can imagine that that last one's also probably 50%. And if we take a look at it, in fact, it is. So it starts to help you understand like how you would need to write your classes to get these to behave the way that they are behaving, okay? And then basically we just have the footer of that article, and it ends in the same way that the others do. All right, and so this is a good way for you to kind of just start looking at this in terms of how you would break this down and start building up your styling. But it's going to be your job to get it to look like this as much as you possibly can. And I would like for you to go ahead and stick with the same basic color schemes and stuff. If you decide that you want to do something that's a slightly different color scheme, I'm okay with that, but probably you want to stick to the basic way that it's styled. So like maybe don't make the background image or the background of the body some garish color, especially because it's got a bunch of colorful artwork against it, right? So you kind of have to be a little bit careful about that. But if you wanted to make this not red and maybe it's some other color, and maybe make this kind of tealish blue color or something else, that's probably okay. Just make it somewhat visually appealing. Now let me show you really quickly what you're actually going to start with. Okay, so this is what you're actually going to begin with, and this is what your page currently looks like. All right, so if we were to do a side-by-side comparison, all right, well let's open this in a brand new window. Then we get this, right, with these images that are all full size, that are just gigantic, right? And there's not enough room for all of them. And the text, the text is not styled. And anyway, this is where you're going to start, and it's going to end up putting you back. Once you're finished, it should look like the other thing that I just showed you, which is something that looks like this, right? Okay, so that gives you some understanding of what it is that you're going to be working with, right? Where it jumps, and you can jump back to top, right? And so on and so on. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to help you out.